This video is going to walk you through today's lesson on completing the square and parabolas in vertex form. The target says at the end of 42 minutes, I can express a parabola in vertex form. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is vertex form. So vertex form is just another phrase for completed square form. I can also identify the focus and directrix. So this last piece will be a challenge problem if you want to try them at the end. But our main goal for today is that you can express a parabola in vertex form. So you should have watched a video last night for homework to review how to complete the square. So that's going to help you with number 1. And then number 2 in the do now is a review from the past few days. So pause the video at this point, give the do now 1 and 2 a try, and then hit play when you're ready to check your work. So at this point, you should have tried do now 1 and 2. And I'm going to go over them, so check your work. If you have questions, you can pause, rewind, anything like that. Number 1 says, which equation has the same solution as x squared minus 6x minus 12 equals 0? So we're going to complete the square in order to do that. When we complete the square, I set up 2 blank spaces, a plus blank that goes inside, and then a minus blank that goes outside. In order to find what goes in the blank spaces, it's going to be b over 2 squared. So b, remember this is a, b, c. b in this case is negative 6. So negative 6 divided by 2 squared is going to give you 9. So I'm going to put a 9 in each blank space. The reason the first 3 terms are in parentheses is because you're going to factor. You can factor the long way using am, or you can use the shortcut of x squared, and what goes inside the parentheses is half of b. So I'm going to cut that negative 6 in half, and it becomes negative 3. And then I'm going to combine these 2 outside pieces, a negative 9 and a negative 12. Negative 9 plus negative 12 gives me negative 21, and then I still have equals 0. So looking at my answer choices, I'm going to cross off choices 3 and 1 because they have a plus 3, and then they moved their 21 to the other side, so I could just add 21 to both sides, which is where I end up with choice 2 as my answer. And that's going to be useful for today's lesson. And then lastly, this number 2 is a review of the last few days. Given the equation x minus 6 squared equals 16 times y plus 4, state the vertex, focus, and directrix, and sketch. So it's an x squared. So because I have an x squared equation, that tells me one of 2 things. X squared opens up or down. If it opens up, it's positive. If it opens down, it's negative. So in my equation over here, this is a positive. So because it's positive, it's going to open up. The vertex is what's being added or subtracted to x and y. So my vertex is going to be 6, negative 4, because it's always the opposite. So because it's an x minus 6, it's going to be a positive 6 in the vertex, and because it's y plus 4, it's going to be a negative 4 in the vertex. So I can start by sketching that. So here's my vertex, and it opens up. So now to find my focus and directrix, I need to know what P is. Well, the equation that you need to memorize is x squared equals 4py. So if I rewrite this, that's what they gave me, the 4p is really 16. So 4p equals 16, so that means that p equals 4. And remember, p is the distance, so I'm going to count up 4 units, and I'm going to count down 4 units. So if I count up 4 units, here's my focus, and then here is my directrix. Remember, the focus is a point, x comma y. So my focus is the point 6 comma 0, and my directrix is the equation y equals negative 8. So there's your do now. If you have questions or need to review it, rewind or pause as you need. So we're going to get into today's lesson. And once again, as we go through the lesson, if you don't understand something, you can pause and rewind if you need to. Or if I'm going through a problem and you already have it, you can fast forward if you'd like. Use your calculator to graph the following two equations. Y equals x squared minus 4x minus 9, and y equals x minus 2 squared minus 13. So what you should do at this point is pause the video, take out your calculator, type each of these into y equals, and take a look at their graphs. And then when you're ready, make some observations and then hit play to pick back up with the video. So at this point, you should have your calculators out and you should have graphed your two equations. So in y equals, in y1, which is blue, is my x squared minus 4x minus 9. And in y2, which is red, I have the x minus 2 squared minus 13. So when I hit graph, you're going to notice that you only see one picture. And if you were watching while the calculator graphed it, it actually graphed the blue equation, and then the red equation got graphed directly on top of it. Now you can't see the whole picture, so if you'd like, you can hit zoom and zoom out, or what I like to do is hit window, and I'm going to change my y minimum, and I'm going to make my y minimum negative 20, and then I'll hit graph again. And actually you can see it again here. It's going to graph the blue one first. Now I can see the whole picture, and it's going to graph the red one right on top of that blue one. So what you should notice is because they're right on top of each other, that means it's the same equation. So it's the same graph. So I have two different equations that give me the same graph. And what that means is that it's equivalent. So this one is going to be the same as this one. It's just disguised or changed around a little bit. So we're going to do the math to see what happens and how it gets transformed into that. So I'm going to start with that original equation, y equals x squared minus 4x minus 9. And this is what we're going to end up with. This is vertex form or completed square form. And the reason it can be called completed square form is because you're going to complete the square in order to put it into this form. So just like we did in the do now, I'm going to set it up with two blank spaces, a plus blank inside and a minus blank outside. So if you want, you can pause the video and try it on your own and then pick back up, or you can just continue following along. So b over 2 squared. In this case, it's negative 4 over 2 squared, which gives me 4. So I'm putting a 4 in each blank space. Remember, the first piece, the first three terms, is what's being factored. So this is going to be x minus 2 squared. I use the shortcut of taking this piece and cutting it in half, or you can use AM. And then the last two pieces get combined together. Negative 4 and negative 9 give me negative 13. So if you notice, this equation was that second equation up here, and they match. This is known as vertex form. So this is an example. The generic form is with variables. So the generic form is over here. Y equals a x minus h squared plus k. Your vertex is always going to be the opposite if it's in parentheses. So my negative 2 is in parentheses. So when I take my vertex is going to be a positive 2. And this minus 13 on the outside is not in parentheses, so it stays the same. So my vertex is 2, negative 13. So in the general form, it's going to be h, comma, k. H gets changed in the sign because it was in a parentheses. K is not in parentheses, so it stays the same. You only change the signs when it's inside a parentheses. And if you want, you can check on your calculator, because we were just doing this one, to see if your vertex is correct. So if I go back to my calculator and I go to my table, so second graph, that point 2, negative 13 is in the middle. The reason it's in the middle is because your vertex is the minimum. It's going to form a rainbow pattern on top and bottom of it, or a repeating pattern on the top and the bottom. So the 2, negative 13 is in the middle. Okay, so a couple other notes that you may just want to make yourself. A is going to be a number on the outside that'll deal with the vertical stretch, if you remember that from Algebra 1. H is going to be the horizontal shift, and K is going to be the vertical shift. Okay, so flip it over and let's take a look at another example. These directions say convert the following parabola from standard form into vertex form. Remember, vertex form, you should be thinking complete the square. Then it says state the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So we're going to do this one and then I'll talk about what the axis of symmetry is. G of x equals x squared minus 6x minus 2. Remember, g of x is the same thing as y equals, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to rewrite this and set up my blank spaces. X squared minus 6x plus blank minus 2. So b over 2 squared. B is negative 6. So negative 6 over 2 squared is going to give me 9 that goes in each blank space. So this piece here gets factored. I'm going to use the shortcut. So the shortcut is x minus half of b. B is 6. If I cut it in half, I'm going to get 3. So x minus 3 squared. And then these two pieces give me a minus 11. So here's the vertex form. Now, before I continue and state the vertex and the axis of symmetry, you can check your work. In order to check, you can put this into y1 and put this into y2 to make sure they're the same. So in my calculator, I can go back and I can type in x squared minus 6x minus 2. And then in y2, I can type in parentheses x minus 3 squared minus 11. And then I'm going to hit zoom 6 because I want to go back to that original window, because I always like to go to the original window first. And you're going to see them sketched. So there's my blue one, which was y1, my original. And there's the red one right on top of it. So because they're graphed right on top of each other, I've done it correctly. So I'm going to go back. I've done it correctly. Now I need to state the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So the vertex is going to be a positive 3 because it's the opposite of what's inside the parentheses, and a negative 11. Once again, you can check that on your calculator. My calculator, you can't see it right now, so if I hit window, give me 1 second. If I hit, oh, I need to recalibrate my board, so give me 1 second. Okay, so if I hit window, I can change my y minimum to negative 15 and hit graph. And now you should be able to see the vertex on the graph. Or you can go to the table. And like I said, in the table, it is going to be what's in the middle of the rainbow pattern or the repeating pattern. So if I hit second graph, here's my table. So what you want to do is you want to find the pattern. And if you notice, my pattern's towards the bottom. The negative 7s repeat, the negative 10s repeat as the y value, and stuck in the middle of them is 3, negative 11. So that's my vertex. So if I sketch a picture, here is my vertex, and here's my parabola. Your axis of symmetry, if you remember back to Algebra 1, your axis of symmetry is a vertical line that goes straight through the vertex. So my axis of symmetry is always going to be the x coordinate of the vertex. So it's going to be x equals 3. And this was what they were looking for. You have your completed square form, and you have your vertex and your axis of symmetry. So what I'd like you to do right now is hit pause on the video, try examples 2 and 3 on your own. Complete the square to put it in vertex form, and then identify the vertex and the axis of symmetry. When you're done, hit play and you can check your work. The solutions will be there. So check your work for examples 2 and 3. You should have your equation in vertex form, your vertex, and your axis of symmetry. So now we're going to move on to example 4 together. If you need to, hit pause and try to find your mistake, and then you can hit play when you're ready to pick back up. So if we take a look at example 4, what you'll notice is I now have a number in front of my x squared. So I have a 2x squared right here. My board is uncalibrated again, so let me calibrate it. Give me 1 second. Okay, so as I said, I have this 2 in front of the x squared. So we're going to do an extra step, but we'll work through it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about these two pieces. So I'm going to rewrite this with the parentheses there, because we always put the blank space inside the parentheses. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out that number in front. So if you notice, there's a 2 in front. So I'm going to take out a 2. So 2 parentheses x squared minus 2x plus 18. And now if you were to distribute that 2 back, you would end up with the original. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to change it. We just want to alter the way it looks a minute. So now I'm going to set up my blank spaces. So 2x squared minus 2x plus blank minus blank plus 18. Everything else is the same so far. So I'm going to find that value for b over 2 squared. So it's b over 2 squared, which is negative 2 over 2 squared, which is going to give me 1. So I'm going to put a 1 in my first blank space, except when you do your second blank space, you not only have a 1, but that 1 is really being multiplied by 2. Because if I were, I'm not going to, but if I were to distribute this 2, it would be 2 times 1. So if I'm going to keep it balanced, I have to put in that 2 times 1. And that is the only difference when you are completing the square or putting it in vertex form when there's a number in front. So I'm going to continue. 2 something squared. Remember, it's half of b, so it's going to be x minus 1 squared. And then these two pieces, that negative 2 times 1 plus 18 gets combined. If you need to, in your calculator, you can go to the home screen, negative 2 times 1 plus 18. And you're going to get 16. So this is my vertex form. My vertex, remember, is the opposite of what's inside, so a positive 1, and the same as what's outside, so a 16. And my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. So there is your answer for example 4. So what I'd like you to do right now is pause the video, try example 5 on your own. Try this one over here on your own, and then when you're ready, hit play, and I'm going to walk you through it, okay? The answers won't just be there like the last ones. This one's a little bit more challenging. I'll walk you through it, but I want you to pause and try it on your own first. And then when you're ready, hit play. Okay, so at this point, you should have tried example 5 on your own, so I'm going to erase a little bit to get it out of the way so we have some room. So remember, the first thing I want to do is I want to group those two pieces together and factor out that 3. So f of x equals 3 times x squared plus 2x plus 9. Then I'm going to set up my 2 blank spaces like I've always done. The first blank space is going to go inside the parentheses. The second blank space is going to go outside. The one inside is always a plus. The one outside is always a minus. To get what goes in that blank space, remember it's b over 2 squared. So 2 over 2 squared is going to give me 1. So I'm putting a 1 here. And the only difference with this type of question is here I have a 3 times 1. And now I'm going to continue. So f of x equals 3. The shortcut is x squared. It's half of b. So half of 2 is 1. And then these two pieces get combined together. Negative 3 times 1 plus 9 is going to give you 6. If you need to, use your calculator. Your vertex in this case is -1, 6 because it is the opposite of what's inside the parentheses and the same as what's on the outside. And your axis of symmetry is x equals -1. Remember, the way to check this on your calculator is to take this original, put it in y1, and then take your answer and put it in y2 to make sure you have the same question, so the same graph. So let's look at that. In y equals, in my original, I'm putting in 3x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then below, I'm putting in the equation that we created. So 3x plus 1 squared plus 6. 3x plus 1 squared plus 6. I'm going to hit zoom 6 to bring me back to that original window, and I'm going to watch it graph. Hopefully the blue line will be drawn, or the blue curve, and the red one goes right on top of it. There you go. That's how you know you've done it correctly, and you can always check your vertex. Second graph, go to the table you're looking for what's in the middle of the pattern. So if you notice, the 54s match up, the 33s match up, the 18s match up, the 9s match up, and then that 6 is left alone in the middle. So -1, 6 is your vertex, which is what we had. So I'm going to do one more with you, example 6, and then you're going to continue on your own. So flip it over. Let's take a look at example 6. Consider the function a of x equals -x squared minus 8x plus 2. Identify the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So there isn't a number in front, but there's a negative in front. So we're going to treat that just like we did the last one, with a negative. So I'm going to rewrite the problem first so I have some room, and I'm going to group these two pieces together and factor out. Remember, there's an imaginary -1. So a of x equals -1, x squared plus 8x. And then I have my plus 2. And now I'm going to continue. If you want, pause the video, try this one on your own, and then hit play to start back over again and check your answer. So a of x equals -1, x squared plus 8x plus blank minus blank plus 2. In the blank space, it's b over 2 squared. b is 8, so 8 over 2 squared is going to give me 16. So that's what goes inside the first blank space, and then the next one is -1 times 16, because remember there's this -1 on the outside. So a of x equals negative, you can put the 1 or you don't have to, x plus 4 squared, because it's half of b, that's the shortcut, and then this whole piece I'm going to put in my calculator. If you don't want to do it in your calculator, that's fine, but remember that a negative and a negative make a positive. So in my calculator, in the home screen, I have -1 times 16 plus 2, which gives us 18. So there is my vertex form. The vertex is the opposite of what's inside, so -4, 18, and your axis of symmetry is going to be x equals the part of the vertex. So there is your vertex form, axis of symmetry, and vertex. So at this point, you are done with the lesson. You're going to continue working on practice problems below 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Whatever you do not finish is homework. 1 through 5, whatever you do not finish is homework. And then if you would like a challenge, the last 2 pages you could try as a challenge.